Daily Detroit is brought to you by the community. Support our work at patreon.com/dailydetroit.
I'm Sven Gustafson, and this is your Daily Detroit for December 18th, 2018.
And I'm Jer Stays, coming at you from a beautiful, sunny day in the University District. On today's show, we talk all about the Metropolitan Building, unveiled Monday as the latest example of the renovation of a historic building in Detroit. It's a beautiful building that many believed might never be saved. Mayor Mike Duggan asked the crowd of assembled onlookers if they were ready to see a
building lit up for the first time since Jimmy Carter was president? I mean, think about that. The 1970s it closed down, and you think about 40 years of decline. Since then, we have come all the way back.
The Metropolitan will become the Element Hotel by Westin, a 110-room extended stay hotel with first-floor retail and a rooftop bar. Swanky.
Indeed. Today, I talk with David Di Rita of the Roxbury Group, one of the developers of the building. And local historian Dan Austin of historicdetroit.org joins us as well. But first, let's pay some bills.
Daily Detroit is brought to you in part by our friends at Milo Digital. Milo Digital is a full-service digital marketing agency that engineers quality results through data and innovative strategies. Learn more at milodetroit.com.
David Di Rita is founder and principal of Roxbury Group. Along with Means Group in Detroit, they developed the Metropolitan Building. David, welcome to Daily Detroit. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be with you.
So the Metropolitan Building, the renovation, I guess, is done now. Congratulations on that. Wasn't this building like dropping chunks of concrete and, pieces of the facade onto the street and businesses below? I mean, how bad was this building when you took it over? Well,
we have always said that these major buildings downtown are never too far gone. Usually the indications of that you read in the papers about certain buildings are exaggerated, and that these buildings were really built for a long time. However, I will tell you, as buildings go, and we've done a fair number of historic restorations, this one was as far gone as anything we've ever dealt with. And we also redeveloped the old Globe Trading Company building down on the riverfront, which we thought was a wreck at the time. But no, the building.
That's the DNR Outdoor
The
Adventure
DNR,
Center.
That's correct, the Outdoor Adventure Center. And but this building was very compromised, and it was of course famously losing its facade, which occurred on a lot of buildings, though probably to a greater degree on that one than any other downtown over the years. And I suppose the United Artists is a close second. But what was actually also the case is, just given how long the building was exposed to the elements, which was nearly 40 years, it was actually structurally compromised on several floors. So basically, the concrete had spalled and given way, and the reinforcing metal inside had rusted away. So it was a challenge.
So $33 million redevelopment project. What was the renovation project itself like, and what were some of the biggest challenges?
Well, it was actually, I actually was determined to really enjoy this project. And I think as a team, we managed to do it because it was a challenge. Just about every aspect of the building was a challenge, but it was also a phenomenal privilege to be able to work on a building as remarkable as this and bring it back. And it really was, normally you're dealing with issues of the challenges of buildings of this vintage, bringing them into the modern age. Most of them never had modern HVAC, modern IT systems, modern insulation, safety, fire suppression. So, and you have to figure out how to do all of that, obviously, in any historic restoration. This one had the added challenge of its just frankly very unique physical characteristics. The building is basically a triangle, and it's sort of a reverse flatiron building, in that the front is very broad, but the rear of the building is about 9 feet, and so you have this frankly kind of kooky building when it came right down to it, that had to be preserved, obviously, but we also had to figure out how to bring modern hotel into the building, and the upper floors laid out nicely in the end for hospitality. But the lower floors as breathtakingly beautiful as they are now, were really kind of a crazy quilt of rooms and mezzanines and just sorting out how to make the space flow and how to make it work, and also how to unlock kind of the building's some of its hidden beauty in spaces that we wanted to preserve. It was a design challenge as much as anything else, and it was one that really didn't end with the drawings. We realized as we got into the building that we continued to refine the plans to do as much as we possibly could to showcase the building's features.
You purchased the building a year ago for $250,000. Did you buy it with the intent of, converting it and turning it over to a private hotel operator? Is that sort of your model?
Well, for a couple clarifications, it was actually 2 years ago that we acquired the building from the city of Detroit. We were still putting the financing together, but it was acquired under a development agreement with the city with the explicit intention of developing the Element Hotel in the building, as well as retail, which we're still working on. So yes, this was something of a prototypical Detroit Economic Growth Corporation driven deal, where the city agreed to transfer the building at nominal consideration in exchange, really, for our commitment to make the investments. And so absolutely, it was all part of the plan at the front end. We once we acquired the building, I think we acquired it in the summer of 16. By the summer of 17, it was under construction, and as noted, we're actually nearing completion of the building. We were far enough along that we really wanted to dedicate the building and have an opportunity to have the community see the historic components mostly of the building yesterday.
All right, thanks for clearing that up. So tell us what the building is like now. If you walk inside, what are you going to see?
Well, the thing that strikes everybody immediately is the restoration of the Great Hall, which is the building's lobby. It served as the building's lobby when it was a jewelry emporium, and it's a unique building. Its history is unique as well. It's not a typical building in that era. The mercantile buildings that went up in that era tended to be built particularly of that scale, tended to be built for a user. So you had your Grinnell building, you had your Sanders building, your Singer building, your Meyer Chesser Chess building, all of which have obviously been renovated and repurposed. This was really built as something of a vertical shopping mall with a specific focus on jewelry. And the developers saw it as an opportunity to co-locate a number of jewelers in the building, and they concluded in their desire to make it a building that people would want to visit, that designing it really to look something like a Gothic castle would be of interest, and they spared no expense. The building has rose tea marble, Tennessee marble. It has about 4 different species of marble, in fact, some of them which were not easy to locate in this day and age, as well as decorative plaster detail, which we've replicated, decorative tapestries, just a beautiful post and beam system on the ceiling that we've replicated. And so when you walk in, it was our hope and goal, and I feel like we got there, that no one who did not know how devastated that building was, and that lobby was pretty well destroyed. I mean, we were really talking about archaeology as much as historic restoration at the front end, taking pieces of it and replicating it. That we really would not want anyone to have a clue that occurred. In other words, if somebody had come back from the 1940s to our present, they might just say the building's been well maintained. And so you're struck by this Great Hall, which we had the good fortune working with the Park Service to extend into a 2-story experience. The second floor, which was one of the still partially existing historic retail corridors with glass storefront all the way down the corridor, we preserved and connected to that first floor with a grand staircase, which was there, but which was sort of cut off, so you only saw one floor at a time. We were able to change that perspective slightly through our work with the Park Service and the State Historic Preservation Office, and I think it got to a really beautiful, historically appropriate resolution there, and so it allows people to really appreciate those spaces, and so you get to see all of that. It's sort of dripping with architectural elements, and then the Element Hotel lobby itself is actually deployed in the rear of the building in space that would otherwise have not have been public space. And we're still getting that area furnished out and ready for the actual opening of the hotel.
Okay. So then those first 2 floors will be devoted to retail. Is that what the plan is?
The first floor, there are 2 retailers located off the Great Hall, and then the second floor is actually meeting and event space.
Okay, gotcha.
So it'll be run by our hotel management company, Azul Hospitality, but it's really the Metropolitan Buildings, if you will, meeting and event space. It's a model we really followed at the David Whitney as well. When we incorporated the Aloft Hotel there, we added a second floor of meeting space, which wasn't technically a part of Aloft's brand program, but we knew would be received well because there's a lot of demand generally downtown for business meetings and events, and people just like being in these buildings. So we decided to do that again with those older storefronts upstairs.
Did I see there's restaurant space here too?
Well, we are developing right now. And I think this part was included in the press release. We are developing a rooftop venue called the Monarch Club, which will be food and beverage. It'll be I characterize it more as a bar with food than a restaurant, and but it'll have a nice menu, and that's going to be a really neat setting. That was originally a luncheon location at the top of the building. It was referred to in the old press materials as a ladies' lunch room. So I guess for the customers of the jewelry operation. Yeah, definitely. I think men will be allowed up there now as well. And so we are redeploying that space as a bar, the Monarch Club, and it has a really remarkable 3-terrace situation up there. So the rear of the building is a fairly large terrace that'll be open to the public, and then there are 2 smaller courtyard terraces in the front that are hidden behind the parapet wall, a little more private. And I think people will find that just to be a really compelling space up there. It's interesting for all of the activity that's gone on in that neighborhood. There really are still no certainly high rise or even close to high rise, 14 stories in this case, just open to the public rooftop bars. You have some nice event spaces. You have the Detroit Athletic Club has a wonderful space on the rooftop, but that's private. And this will be a bar open to the public and restaurant open to the public, and I think it'll be well received.
Excellent. When does the hotel open?
We are still shooting for in and around year end, I characterize it as, where there's a process of bringing on our team members now and training them and getting the building fully fitted out with furnishings in all the rooms. Those are coming daily now. We are certainly booking for the auto show. But we'll see if we can get the place open before that for some just walk-in business.
Excellent. Well, we can't wait to see it, and thanks for fixing up another jewel in Detroit.
Well, it's kind of what we do, and the nice part is I'm putting myself out of business here because we're running out of jewels to fix up. They're all getting fixed up so quickly now.
That's right. David Di Rita is founder of Roxbury Group. Thanks so much, David.
No, thank you.
Joining us by phone now is Dan Austin. He's the curator of the website historicdetroit.org. Dan also happens to work for the PR agency that represents Roxbury Group. Dan, how are you today?
I'm great, Sven. How are you?
I'm fantastic, thanks. So the Metropolitan Building, what's significant about it?
It's a real looker.
It is.
There's just no other building on Detroit's skyline that has that neo-Gothic style like the Metropolitan. It's beautiful. It's unusually shaped, that only in Detroit in the 1920s when real estate was at such a premium could someone take a misshapen alley and drop a gorgeous neo-Gothic 15-story skyscraper on it, So it's one of those buildings that's also been, I think, at the top of everyone's wish list for a long time of saving, but for decades. I mean, the building had been abandoned for longer than I've been alive. For decades, nobody could make it work until now.
Yeah. You're the history guy, obviously. How far back does the building go? Like, when did it open? Who built it, et cetera?
So it opened in 1925, May of 1925, and it was actually a one-stop shop for all of your jewelry needs. It housed dozens and dozens and dozens of jewelers, goldsmiths, diamond cutters, you name it. And it's weird in 2018, almost 2019, to think about a building with such a use. But you're talking about an era where there were no malls, there was no home shopping network. This was where Detroiters went to buy their class rings, wedding rings, anniversary presents. It was known as the Jeweler's Court. It was kind of its nickname. And so, over the years and talking with folks, I have talked with people who remember going to the Metropolitan Building because that's where you went. And it was also built at a time when, in 1925, when Detroit's fortunes, both of the city and its population, were increasing. So Detroiters had more disposable income to buy shiny, glitzy things. So for a long time, the building did very well. But as Detroit's fortunes declined, and as the rise of the shopping malls out in the suburbs, home shopping network, you name it, there were just a number of blows that the Metropolitan Building was not able to survive.
The building closed in the 70s. Did it remain primarily in use for jewelry businesses up until that point?
Yeah, right. Certainly not anywhere near the occupancy of its heyday, but the building did hang on through the 70s. I mean, 74, 75, I think, is when things started getting really dicey, and maybe the building kind of closed, but it wasn't officially deemed abandoned until the city seized it in November of 1978 for taxes, and then closed it shortly thereafter in early 1979. So you've got a building, didn't have any business, any life whatsoever. It just sat there waiting for this day to finally arrive.
It's mostly all fixed up now. The renovation is nearly done, but it was obviously in significant disrepair. Were there like windows? I mean, what do you know about the physical condition that it had sort of fallen to?
Well, it had windows. Well, working. Remains to be seen. I mean, there were a lot of broken windows, vandals, trespassers, scrappers, they all did their number on it.
Yeah, the usual culprits, yeah.
The usual culprits. And then, of course, on the outside of the building, the great architectural photographer, Richard Nickel, had this great quote where, amazing architecture has only two natural enemies, weather and stupid men. And weather, in this case, and then it helped to peel bricks away from the facade. So though its next door neighbor, the Wurlitzer, was far more infamous for its attempts to kill people with falling masonry, I know of a couple people who said that they dodged some falling bricks on the building. But by and large, the terracotta on the front, which is what makes the Metropolitan such a beautiful building, whether it's beautiful white terracotta neo-Gothic arches and things of that nature, or the amazing knights that are on the penthouse, stayed intact, thankfully. And I think that is really what helped save the building. It was certainly not what was on the inside. It was all about what was on the outside. That's what counted this time around.
Yeah. Have you been inside to see the renovation?
Yeah, I was there last night for the public rededication ceremony to help welcome people back into the building. The Great Hall, as they're calling it now, or the lobby, as I guess you would pedestrianly call it, has been lovingly restored. There was still traces of some of the original paint and the design. That was all restored and kept faithful. The plaster was in various states, where the water hit it, because, once water hits plaster, it returns to its natural state of being a glob of goo. So where it was still intact, they took that off and then created molds to recast the original plaster. There were some wood corbels, some of which were stolen over the years, some of which were also damaged by water. A friend of mine was able to track down someone who had stolen some of them and was peddling them on eBay, and was able to connect Roxbury Group with that seller to buy them, and then they were able to take those to a woodworker who recreated the missing corbels. So the building looks, while it's not 100% original, it is a faithful recreation of what was originally there. And there are parts of it that are still original, but I mean, keeping in mind this building had been abandoned for 39 years.
Right. And
38, 1979.
And certainly beats the alternative of demolition, right?
Way better. And this is a building that had been threatened by demolition so many times, it's almost hard to keep track of it. I think that the city did try in more recent times to find a developer for it when downtown's fortune started to turn around. But everyone from Dan Gilbert to some other smaller developers, they just couldn't make it work. And I talked with some folks who worked for the DGC back in the George Jackson days, who said that the only reason that building is still standing is that the DGC ran out of demolition money after its demolition bender.
Oh, wow.
The Statler Hotel, the Lafayette Building, Tiger Stadium. When we were tearing down all of those landmarks in the early mid-2000s, there just wasn't money to tear it down. Because the other thing about this building that is so fascinating, at least to me being a history and building nerd, is that the reason why it's in such good shape is that it is built with like 1.5 foot pure concrete floors, because it had to support all the weight of those jeweler's safes.
Oh, wow.
So the building is built like a tank.
Yeah.
I mean, some bricks might have fallen off of it here and there, but there was no danger of structural collapse. So one of the other things that was a challenge about this building was that to illuminate watch faces back in the old days, they used a radioactive substance called radium-266. And so the building had to go through a massive environmental cleanup, and that didn't happen until 1997.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, there was a bunch of money. Now, you would have had to do that cleanup regardless whether you're going to demolish it or save it. But, that was another major hurdle in trying to save this building earlier, was that on top of, replacing all of the plaster or drywall, whatever, and remediating that building, part of the building, you had to remediate this toxic goo that had been all over the building. So it did kind of leave the top floors being gutted down to the shell, because when you're trying to clean up a building that had been abandoned for 20 years, you're not worried about saving some of the bits and pieces. You're just trying to clean up as fast and cheaply as possible.
Right. So this building clearly has an incredible history. Is there any kind of kiosk inside the new hotel that's going to tell any of that story or anything like that?
Well, we hope so. It remains to be seen. I mean, one thing about Roxbury Group, and it should be noted that Roxbury Group did this development in partnership with the Means Group, so there were two developers involved. But Roxbury did the David Whitney building, and they have a nice little tribute to the history of the building there. And down the line, I think that maybe you might see something, but I think, and again, they are my client in the interest of full disclosure, but Roxbury Group is very mindful of the history and legacy of these places that they're saving.
Thank goodness for that. So Dan Austin is the curator of the website historicdetroit.org. Dan, thanks so much.
Thank you.
That's it for your Daily Detroit. I'm Sven Gustafson.
And I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit.
You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.
Irresistible you.